For this week's message, I want to warn y'all about another flu pandemic. But I'm not talking about getting your flu shots to protect yourself from getting the unwanted influenza virus. I'm talking about protecting yourself from unwanted influence. Yes, I know that's corny, but hang with me. I'm going somewhere with it. I looked it up in the dictionary, and the word influence comes from the prefix in and a Latin root word fluere, which means to flow. So the things that influence you are the things that you allow to flow into you, to affect the ways that you think and feel. If you've been following my devotionals all year, you know that I'm deeply concerned about the state of discourse in our country right now. 2020 has thrown it all at us. Coronavirus, racial unrest, political extremism, murder hornets, cancel culture, fires, riots, and even Tiger Kings. But in the midst of all of this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad stuff, the thing that bothers me even more is the way that we are unthinkingly allowing big voices to influence us. What do I mean? Well, first let me read a couple verses for you. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 3 and 4, Paul warns his young protege in the ministry. He says, "For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths." Now, Paul is talking about life in the church, right? He's really warning about false Bible teaching that itches our ears instead of sticking faithfully to Bible doctrine. But I do think Paul's words also describe our culture in general during this time and this age. We're living in a culture that is actively accumulating for ourselves teachers to suit our own passions. In other words, we only listen to inputs that reinforce what we already think and believe. What we don't realize is how much that influences the ways we think and feel. So, for example, if you get your news only from NPR and CNN, then you are probably going to more and more think according to their political slant. If you get most of your information from Fox News and Rush Limbaugh, then you're probably more and more going to think according to their political slant. And believe me, every news media source has a political and social bias. And then there's science. Listen to science, we're told. Well, remember, science is not God. Science once taught us that the earth is flat, and that the solar system revolves around us, and that coffee is bad for you. Science is always our best human theories based on observation and repetition. Science has taught us much, and it's very important and helpful. But our understanding of science can never be full and complete. And chances are the science that you listen to is the science you've heard from your biased news media source of choice. Well, then there's social media. It is super easy to fill your Facebook and Instagram feeds with voices that only reinforce your own preferences. If you're hopping mad about some issue in our country, there is a good probability that your anger came from allowing other people's collective anger to flow into you through social media. Can you see the danger of allowing yourself to be influenced by accumulating teachers to suit your own passions? That's how we fall into believing myths and half-truths. So what are we to do? Well, here's what Paul says in the next verse, verse 5. "As for you, always be sober-minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry." To be sober-minded means you be in control of your own thoughts and feelings. Don't let worldly influences flow into you and take over. In other words, be careful of the influence pandemic. Think about the voices you are allowing to flow into you, and make sure that God's word is always the biggest voice that you're allowing to influence you. That way, you can focus more on being an influencer. Focus more of your energy on letting the gospel flow out of you toward others in your actions and your words. And Incidentally, that's where we're going to be talking about on Sunday mornings in our sermon series, as we move into the last big section of the book of Romans, how the gospel affects the way we live, so that we can be influencers, letting the gospel flow out rather than letting the world flow in. So I hope you have a good week. Thanks.